Hello everybody, welcome to Build Fly Go. We're going to do just a quick video on what the spares and supplies and tools were that we took on the trip. I know it's been a couple of weeks or maybe a week since we got back, and we're just getting back in the rhythm of the craziness going on in the US right now, and probably all over the world. And I snuck out to the hangar here, which is an absolute mess, and I'm starting to try and do some cleanup, and part of that was putting away a lot of the tools. So let's flip this camera around. Okay, so here are the spares, and all of this fit in this Ziploc bag. I like using these gallon Ziploc bags because they're very usable in the field for all sorts of things. In particular, I use them for oil changes. I put the filter in the oil change in the bag before removing the filter, and then I minimize the mess. So a handful of gloves. I believe there are 4 gloves here. Fuses. I actually noticed that I doubled up on fuses. I'll show you that side a little later. It's interesting opening all of this up and seeing where I maybe didn't need things. Roll of electrical tape. Always handy to have some electrical tape. Probably didn't need that much. I have 2 sets of spark plug wires here. The reason I have these is early this year we were having some issues with spark plug misses, and we suspected it could have been the wires. We sent the magnetos out for inspection, and they were inspected and everything was fine, but I just wanted to make sure. The eMag Air sent me a spare set of cables just in case, and I decided to take 2 of them with us. We did replace all of the spark plugs in the airplane before a couple of flights before the trip, just to make sure that it wasn't that, and it turns out that replacing all the spark plugs took care of the problem, so we didn't need to use this. I also have 2 spark plugs. You'll notice that these are not airplane spark plugs. These are auto spark plugs. They're NGKs, BR8ESs. These are just standard auto spark plugs. I use electronic ignition in my airplane, which means I can use spark plugs that cost $5 instead of $25. So a complete spark plug change in my airplane is, what, 8 times 5, $40, which is less than 2 spark plugs getting swapped out on a regular airplane. Because of that, I have to use these spark plug reducer bosses. It basically takes the 18 millimeter regular size aviation spark plug boss and has a threaded 14 millimeter, which is what these are. Couple of extra washers, good to have. More fuses. These are the fuses for the alternators. I believe one of these is 25 amps and one of them is 60 amps. And they just go on the firewall. Spare gas cap. You do not want to lose a gas cap. I've heard all sorts of horror stories of people losing gas caps. It's not common, of course, but I would very much rather have a gas cap than not. Some paper towel, a lot of paper towel. Speed tape. So this is basically aluminum foil tape. Mostly in our airplane, where I use this is in the winter. I have to block off the oil cooler inside the engine compartment because otherwise it cools the oil way too much. So I use that for that. Over here we have CO2 cartridges. I believe these are 30 gram CO2 cartridges, 25 gram CO2 cartridges, and a little inflator. So you thread the CO2 cartridge onto here, and then there's I think it's called a Presto valve or Schrader valve or whatever the valve is on this side. And we've discovered that for the tires that we have on the airplane over there, 2 of these 25 gram cartridges will fill the tire from empty to, I believe it's 50 PSI or whatever it is that we set it to. So we decided that we would double up. So we had 4 of them, which means we can inflate either 2 times the mains, or 1.5, I believe, was inflating the fronts. The front tires are a little smaller. Cotter pins. These are the cotter pins for the main tire nut. I figured these would not be the easiest thing in the world to find out in the field, the right size, and they're very light and small, so not a big deal. Handful of zip ties, you can never have enough. A variety of sizes of electrical connectors. I also took the crimper for these and a wire cutter. I did all the electrical work in this airplane. I know where everything is. I know how to repair everything. This is very, very light, and it would be a nightmare if we had a loose wire somewhere and I needed to replace that or repair that, and I didn't have those. So we figured cheap insurance. Another cheap insurance set here. These are O-rings. This is the fuel drain O-ring. Let me show you where this goes. For the fuel drains right here in the airplane. These are standard aviation fuel drains, nothing special about them. The O-ring kit is, again, tiny and incredibly light. And that is one of those things where every so often an airplane will get a leak in the fuel drain. I've never had to replace these O-rings, but I had them and I thought, I'm just going to throw those in there because it would be nice to be able to fix that if I had to. Same thing for this. These are fuel pump O-rings. They're for the electrical fuel pump in the airplane. Again, very, very light. And if we had bad fuel and a fuel clog or something like that, we would need to open up the fuel pump and clean out the filter and all that kind of stuff. These are main wheel and nose wheel O-rings. So we use tubeless O-rings, tubeless wheels and tires in this airplane, which means there's no tube inside them, which is not common for a airplane tire. So what that means is the wheel halves have O-rings between them. These are fairly specific. We haven't had a lot of luck finding generic versions of these. Unfortunately, the non-generic ones are pretty expensive. I bet it's about, I want to say it's $15 per side in O-rings, which is a unnecessary expense for something that's like that. But again, if we had a tire issue and we had to crack the wheels in half, we absolutely needed to have O-rings. These are light. Those came with us. So that's all of our spares, not very much. And the reason it's not very much is we figured we're not going to be in the boonies, right? We're going to be in normal towns that have a little airport and get mail. So if it came down to it, I could have something FedEx overnighted to us without much trouble. It would be expensive, but it would be doable. So these are all kinds of things that we thought, okay, these are light, these are small, and these would get us out of a bind, right? Like a bad spark plug or a flat tire, right? Like I've got everything I need here to fix a flat tire. And that would get us to the next biggest town fairly easily. If we were in a smaller town for a fuel stop and we noticed a problem, we could get ourselves safely to the next big town, which would be a better spot for repairs. Tools. So the tools that are missing from here are ones that I've already taken out of this kit. All of these tools go in this bag. This is a dive equipment bag. We also do some scuba diving. The crimper and the wire cutter is out of here just because this bag is already back in the airplane. I also need to lighten it up a bit. So I have a multimeter. This is a Fluke 101. It is the smallest Fluke they make. And interestingly, this is not sold in the US market. This one is sold in cost-sensitive markets. So I believe this one came from India, I believe. And it's a really inexpensive Fluke meter and a very, very nice little, very light Fluke meter. I mean, look at how small this thing is. And it has everything I need on it. A good ratchet set. I hate bad tools. This is a Vera. The bad tools are a nightmare. So this is a really good ratchet set. It's definitely got more than we need here. We could have lightened this down, and we probably should have, but alas, we didn't. We definitely don't need all of this stuff. But this is usually what sits in the airplane, in the toolbox, and it went with this. A crescent wrench. It's a Jador brand, which is another good tool brand. I'm very particular about that. A multi-tool. We figured there would be a situation in which we would want a multi-tool. We were thinking about bringing a needle-nose pliers with us, and I grabbed the needle-nose pliers, and this was right next to it, and I thought, we might be just better off taking the multi-tool, and we did. This is a cup for raising the airplane for doing checking the tires. So it goes, I never find the spot. It goes in here. Hold on. If I can get this, yep. All right. So you spin that up, and you see that jack over there? Let's see if I can zoom in. That jack, wow, what a mess. That jack cups into here, and you can raise the entire side of the airplane with this. It's what we use to do tire changes, basically, or if for whatever reason you need to get the airplane off the gear. Fairly heavy. It's also a fairly specialized tool. We made this. There's not really a great way to lift the airplane otherwise. Sure, there's quite a few ways to lift the airplane otherwise, but that's the safest one we found. Two box wrenches with clicky ends. These are the most common types used in this airplane. It's the 3/8 and a 7/16. These are the only two we brought because 90% of the bolts in this airplane are 3/8 or 7/16. 3 AAA batteries for the headlamp. This headlamp uses 3 batteries. A couple of zip ties were just in the bag. One benefit of having tubeless tires is I can use an automotive tire plug kit in case of emergencies. So I can plug that tire if there's if we find a hole in it with this, and we can get to the next spot. Tire pressure gauge with the label on the back showing the tire pressure, 58 psi. These are fairly high because they're tubeless tires. One flashlight, one spark plug socket with the adapter so that it will work with that socket. It would be tough getting it off with this socket, but in a pinch we would do it. One stubby screwdriver and one convertible screwdriver. I really like this Viha screwdriver. It lets you change the size, the length of the screwdriver bit, and this comes out all the way as well, and you can flip it around and you have a flat one. So you can set it to any length, right? Like that works. Or you can push it back and anywhere in between. It's got these little, whatever, dimples on there. Really like this. It works well. More fuses. We just noticed we doubled up on fuses. And this is just a rag with a small funnel in here for oil changes and not making a mess in its own Ziploc bag. So that's it. Oh, yeah, there's a spare quarter turn fastener here. This one is broken. I don't know why it was in there. I've got a couple of broken ones now from the last 500 hours or so that we need to replace. I need to order some. I'm actually going to put this in my pocket and then order some. All right, so that was a review of the tools that we took and the spare parts that we took. Post in the comments if you have any questions or anything you'd recommend we would have done differently. Happy to hear from you guys. Hope to have more videos up. Have a great day.